Thank you for listening to Say Something Nice with Martin Weiss, which is a reminder more than anything. Before we get started, please feel free to rate, review, and subscribe to my podcast on your favorite podcast platform. On this week's episode, we'll break down Kyrie Irving's most recent iteration of I Don't Like Being a Basketball Player, Volume 2, and also the quarterback situation in Jacksonville and how it pertains to one Nick Foles. But first, so predictably, Michigan, of course, lost to Ohio State on Saturday, 56-27, in a game that was not particularly close after the first quarter. At this point, if you're a Michigan fan, this should be what you expect. The reason why I say that is because there's been absolutely nothing to make you feel that there'd be any different, right? Ohio State's on a different level. They're a different class. They are the Patriots in comparison to everybody else. And it's obviously not one-to-one because college football has more of these guys like Alabama and Clemson, but Ohio State's right up there. There's a specific few teams in college football that dominate it year in and year out. Ohio State is one of them. University of Michigan is not, and really, truly, honestly, has not been in the history of its football program. And I can say that I went to Michigan. I'm from Louisiana, so I know what, I was about to say real football. I don't want to be dismissive, but I grew up in the SEC. I saw college football at a different level than the state of Michigan has historically. Now, when I was in college, Michigan State was the premier program in the state. That's point blank, period. Mark D'Antonio coached circles around Rich Rodriguez and Brady Hoke. So my first game in Michigan was Rich Rodriguez's first year. So I was there for the 5 years that I was in college. I looked it up and did the math. Were the 5 worst years consecutively in Michigan football history. Mind you, Michigan damn near invented football. So it's been quite some time. So after struggling through the spread offense, no defense of Rich Rodriguez, winning game 65-63 in quadruple overtime, and then the ineptitude of Brady Hoke. Brady Hoke just didn't inspire confidence. You look at him on the sideline, no headset, arms folded, clapping his hands. He was the college version of Jason Garrett for the Dallas Cowboys. It's like, what value are you providing here? So realizing this mistake, Michigan fires Brady Hoke, and the hottest name on the market follows. It qualifies into 2 different things. So what Michigan football needed to do to become relevant again was hire a game-changing, dynamic coach. What Michigan boosters wanted was a Michigan man. The perfect storm arrived with Jim Harbaugh, former Michigan quarterback, hottest name on the market. He had some issues in his former places, but at that period in time when Jim Harbaugh got hired at University of Michigan, he was the hottest name on the market, and people were going after him. Michigan paid him an insane amount of money, and I was concerned at the time because, just because everybody else wants to hire your guy does not mean he's the guy you should be hiring. Every year in sports, we have hot new names, and then the next year, we only know about half of them. It's just the way it goes. But when Michigan hired Jim Harbaugh and made him the highest paid coach in college football, it went to a next level. See, Michigan historically is a 10-win team. Now, as a fan of the SEC growing up, I can tell you that like at a school like LSU, a 9-10 win, who really is a 9-10 win team historically, is not going to accept 9-10 wins. Michigan was good with 9-10 wins as long as you beat Michigan State and Ohio State and went to the Rose Bowl, because that was the program, that was the standard that Bo Schembechler set. When Brady Hoke took his first press conference as a Michigan man, he was talking about the Rose Bowl, not the national title. A reporter even asked him, he said, well, I'm just trying to take care of get to the Big Ten title. You win that, everything else take care of itself. That's straight from Bo. That's straight from Michigan. And that's what Michigan fans wanted to hear at the time. Now, I personally have not been baptized. I was not baptized in the maize and blue like people who are born and raised in Michigan, being from Louisiana. So I kind of looked at it with no, Brady, we should try to win national titles. Big Ten titles would be cool. A nice stepping stone on the way. But let's go get some natties. Now, Brady Hoke was the opposite of a confetti coach. Not a guy that you can see raising the banners. Although I will say he did coach my top 5 Michigan football games in history, was the Sugar Bowl against Virginia Tech. But when Michigan goes and makes Jim Harbaugh the highest paid coach in college football, you're shifting that paradigm. When you go and pay Jim Harbaugh more than more than Dabo Swinney, just like maybe $8,000 or $9,000 less than Nick Saban at the time, you're paying for those results that you haven't been getting. That's what you pay him for. You're paying for him to come in here and shake it all up. Now here's the rub though. This team under Jim Harbaugh, Michigan alumni, my friends, my family, I will tell you this. The last 3 years under Jim Harbaugh, this team has improved. Incrementally, but it's gotten better. I know. I'm the most pessimistic Michigan fan that you probably ever talked to. But especially in this, after Ronnie Bell had that catastrophic drop at Penn State, something clicked. And I'm sitting there watching them thrash up on the likes of Notre Dame, the likes of Illinois, the likes of Michigan State, Indiana. And I'm sitting there, and the worst kind of feeling for a football fan to have is waiting for the other shoe to drop. The other shoe did not drop until the day after Thanksgiving against Ohio State. And Michigan fans, in a vacuum, we should be okay with that. Anybody with 2 eyes can tell you that Ohio State team is up there, top team in the nation. Multiple guys that'll be playing on Sundays. That Ohio State team, even though they have a new coach, it's still Urban Meyer's foundation. The train keeps on rolling. What Michigan fans absolutely have a right to be upset about is the fact that under Jim Harbaugh, Michigan has not catapulted into Clemson, Alabama, Ohio State. And don't tell me about the academic restrictions and all this and that. Guess what? Michigan has the financial want to, and that is all that matters. For more information on that, go listen to Bomani Jones' sidelines pieces on his podcast. He'll break it down to you. Trust me. If you have the financial want to, and Michigan does, and Michigan puts it out there, you should be competing with those guys. I'm not ready to fire Harbaugh because for the first time in his tenure, I feel like the team got markedly better throughout the season. Offensively, the first 3 games, this team should have lost to Army. They were in a close one, Middle Tennessee State, until like midway through the third quarter. It should have been, and then it all came crashing down against Wisconsin. But Jim Harbaugh had this team improving. But they're going to need some changes to be made. Hopefully he can make them better than he did with his hiring of Josh Gaddis, which was a phone call and then like, hey, I like the way you call games on TV. Would you want to come work for me? That's wild. Hopefully he doesn't make decisions such as that. But see, that's what's maddening about it is because sitting here right now, if you just watch the games, you say, okay, that team's improving. Okay, that team got better throughout the year. Offensively, they're there. Defensively, they're always okay. There's a lot of talent on the team. Maybe they can put it all together. Maybe he can get a guy at quarterback. Shea Patterson turned into a good player throughout the course of the year. But maybe we can get like a real stud, like he had Colin Kaepernick, Andrew Luck, Jim Harbaugh did. But I don't know if Jim Harbaugh is aware of his standing. Like self-awareness is so key in sports. And for him to respond the way he did when asked about the coaching gap between Michigan and Ohio State is laughable if you weren't a Michigan fan. I have tears in my eyes. I'm ready to cry because he doesn't get it. Obviously, there's a gap between Ohio State and Michigan. It's evidenced by the records. It's evidenced by the play on the field. There's evidence everywhere. That's not an insulting question. It's fair. The reason why you feel like it's insulting, Jim, is because you are the gap. That's why. It all comes back to you. It's an indictment on you and what you've done at the University of Michigan in your time. Yes, congratulations. You have won all of the games that do not matter unless you lose. which I understand feels unfair. But hey, this is what the sport is. If you don't want the job, don't sign the contract. If you don't want the criticism that comes with it, don't sign the contract. No one in this fan base is going to be okay with paying big money and not winning big games. I think that's simple enough. Alabama lost to LSU and Auburn this year, and they're trying to run Nick Saban out of town. The standard is not the same, and it's not fair to hold them to the same standard. And you'll hear a lot of people in the media talking about, this is what Michigan has always been. This is what Michigan, is historically a 10-win team. Well, historically, Michigan has never had the highest paid coach in college football. So just miss me with that. You pay big money for big wins. Michigan has yet to be delivered big win in the frequency in which they should be occurring in Jim Harbaugh's tenure at the University of Michigan. And I'm not sure he is self-aware enough to make the necessary changes to make that happen, because he thinks it's an insult to talk about the gap between Michigan and Ohio State. Kyrie Irving made his much anticipated return to Boston. Oh, wait, no, he didn't. He didn't make the trip. But his team, the Brooklyn Nets, did last week. And predictably, Boston fans were very, let's say, rambunctious towards the idea that Kyrie Irving's team would have the nerve to come to whatever they call the Garden these days. I know it's called the Garden, but there's some corporate sponsor, and I didn't keep up with them. But all types of signs calling Kyrie a coward, calling Kyrie this and that and the third. I'm sure not all of them were above board, but the vast majority of them, were allowed to go into the stadium and good to go and broadcast on television. We all saw what they were. So, of course, Kyrie, the mercurial man he is, decides to take to Instagram with a post that no one would read because it's just 300 words long if you weren't getting paid to do it. Kyrie essentially went to Instagram with one of those texts that your girl sends you and you only respond to the last question, because there's just so much information inside this message that there's no way I can ascertain this and break it down to you in a very quickly and easy manner. But the highlights of his, I don't want to call rant is overused. The highlight of his take is his idea that he's calling sports ignorant and obtrusive. Quote, "It's one big show that means very, very little in the real world that most people live in." He concludes it with, quote, "Don't fall for the game that's played in front of you." Quote, "Don't fall for the game played in front of you for entertainment. It will never be as serious as dealing with life." Duh. Of course sports is not important as dealing with real life. That's why it exists. This is what Kyrie fundamentally fails to understand about all of this. The reason why the NBA exists is solely for entertainment. That's it. Period. Stop. That's it. Now, it does a lot of other good things and some bad. But the reason why it was created and exists in the way it is currently in its current iteration is for fans. It's for the fans' consumption. Who do you think is financing all of this? Yeah, sure, maybe ESPN gives you the big contract. Gives you the big TV deal, raises the salary cap. Why is ESPN paying that money? Because we're watching it. That's why. That's why you hear all these stories about ratings and ratings being down. Because if we're not watching this anymore, the value that the ability to shoot a basketball at a high percentage, it has none. It's like Colin Kaepernick the other day, being able to throw a football, being able to throw all the throws in a football, throw a football 40 yards in the air without touching the ground, has absolutely no real world utility outside of a football game. Just like shooting 40% from 3-point has no utility outside of a basketball game. Kyrie Irving, you were blessed with the ability to play basketball at a high level and the work ethic and the determination to make it come to fruition. But what you don't understand here, bro, is you are at work and you don't get to dictate how work goes unless you're the boss. And that ain't you. Even when you were in Cleveland, LeBron could dictate how it was going. He's over here saying we need an effing playmaker. They make a trade for Kyle Korver. Do you think LeBron wanted Kyle Korver to be his effing playmaker his last year in Cleveland? No. You don't get to pick how this works out. Now, you can take some ownership over your career, and I'm all for it. You can leave Boston and go to Brooklyn. I'm all for it. You can demand a trade from Cleveland. I'm all for it. Because at the end of the day, it is you, and that is your job. I have a job right now. If I find a job that pays me similar to do the same thing, guess what? I'll have a new job. Just like you should, Kyrie. However, what I can't do is dictate how people are going to feel about me leaving my old one. That's not how this works. And of course, sports is not as important as life. But what you don't understand, Kyrie, is you're the only person who's living this in the day-to-day. You're right. It is entertainment. Essentially, you're a movie star with a six-pack. You're a movie star that works out and shoots basketball, like shoots balls and runs around and sweats. That's what you do. You go in Tuesday, Thursday nights prime time, and you go to the opening of your play. That's what it is, man. I see. Like it's kind of sad. It's kind of sad because he had the death of an important family member. I believe it was his grandfather when he was in Boston, and that's true. Us as a people could work incredibly better at being more compassionate, just in general, especially for people who don't look like us or sound like us or think like us. But in today's world, that is just not how the world works, especially for you. You're rich. You've been famous since you were 17 years old. All because of your ability to play basketball, to play a game, which I fundamentally believe that you enjoy, because in every one of these social media rants, tirades, whatever, quotes, you always talk about how much you love playing the game, and it's all the other stuff around it that you don't like. Well, I'll put it to like this, buddy. You got it better than most, because the vast majority of people hate their jobs. All of them. The whole scenario. Now, I'm somebody who doesn't. But there's definitely some stuff that comes along with my job that I dislike. And there's definitely some things that come along with my job that I voice my opinions to my superiors and the people who can make a difference about it. But what I'm not going to do is pretend that my happiness and my mentality and my mind state is anybody's responsibility but my own. You work in a critical industry, Kyrie. But guess what? What's happening to you is really no different than anybody else at work. Everybody got to put up with something. Everybody got something they don't like with their job. But they go every day, Monday through Friday, to get that check. And because they know what happens if they don't. Now, you're in a better position than most. I imagine that you wouldn't have to work if you ended up retiring soon. And maybe you will with all these knees and shoulders that you've been going through. You've played a lot of basketball in your career, and you've been fragile most of the time. And I know how recovering from injuries can weigh on your mind and weigh on your mentality and your self-esteem and all of that, especially when you have so much value wrapped up in being a basketball player. But Kyrie Irving, what I would suggest to you, sir, is find some value outside of that. Because if all you do is eat, sleep, and dribble, you're going to drive yourself crazy. And all these fans are going to be the vehicle in which that you get there. Because here's the sneaky thing. Those fans already have. They found their release. It's basketball. It's the NBA. It's sports in general. Go to their 9 to 5, grind it out, eat from their boss all day and night. But when they're watching their team, it gives them somebody else to root for, to root against, to yell. It gives them a release of emotion. Fan comes from the word fanatic, because people are crazy about this stuff. Because it gives them a release from the regular world. I understand, Kyrie, you live in the regular world, but you have to see when you go to work, you're putting on a product for us. Just like when I go to work, I'm putting something on TV for people to consume. If people don't consume it, there's no sense in doing it. So be careful what you wish for, Kyrie. When the Jacksonville Jaguars signed Nick Foles over the offseason, I told anybody that would listen that this was the end of Jalen Ramsey in Jacksonville. Why, you might ask? The Jacksonville Jaguars drafted Jalen Ramsey with the 5th pick of the 2016 draft, and he was arguably the best player for the first 2 seasons of it. For the first 2 seasons of his career. You had Carson Wentz, you had Zeke. Zeke was great. Carson Wentz was great. Jalen Ramsey, also great. But then, obviously, Carson got paid because he's a quarterback. Zeke had his holdout in Cabo. You see Jalen Ramsey backing up the Brinks truck to training camp. Okay, what's all this about? That offseason that the Jacksonville Jaguars paid Blake Bortles all that money, it was over for Jalen there. Because he knows what it's like going against Blake Bortles every day in practice. He knows he knows that Blake Bortles is not nice enough to get him to the next level. And also that he's going to, if I'm not going to get to the next level, I might as well get paid. I'm not going to get paid because this joker's getting paid. So Jacksonville gets out from under Blake Bortles. And what did they do? They offer Nick Foles such a contract. It just removed all the goodwill that you possibly could have had from moving on from Blake Bortles in that contract, because all those defensive players know that defense was stacked and they know that quarterback that they had was not good enough to get it done. So they're going to get Nick Foles. Now, this is personal for me because I've been on this bandwagon for quite some time. But if Nick Foles is your answer, you asking the wrong questions. He was a backup in Michigan. He left from Austin Westlake, Texas to Michigan State, where he got beat out by Kirk Cousins. Hometown kid Kirk Cousins. Hey, cool, whatever. He goes to Arizona. He gets beat out there his freshman year. Then proceeds to go 15-35 as a starter. Not great. He gets drafted. The way the NFL works is you see all the time these revolutionary concepts. The first one that comes to my mind is the Wildcat. Miami was running the Wildcat with Ronnie Brown, and it took the league by storm for like 4 weeks. And then they just figured out, let's just go tackle him. And that takes some time. Chip Kelly came in with this big spread concept offense that we had seen just score 1 million points a minute at Oregon. And for that first year in Philadelphia, it was fantastic. 27-2. But you know what it was? It was all stuff that defensive coordinators had not seen at the pro level before. And once they got a year under it, once they got a chance to see it and tackle it and understand it, he fell back down to earth. Another part of the reason why is because running that spread offense, he can't run. He's not a fast guy, and you need a quarterback who can run to run that spread offense to the efficiency that Chip Kelly was trying to do it. But that 27-2 season, I get it. It was great. It broke Brady's 36-4 season. Third best passer rating in history. But then he got traded to St. Louis, and he was so bad in St. Louis. The Rams, all they did was use the number 1 overall pick on Jared Goff. Then he decided to retire until Andy Reid convinced him, hey, will you just come take this backup quarterback check? Because he couldn't beat out Alex Smith in Kansas City, the immortal, the incredible Alex Smith, sarcasm included. So then he ends up back in Philly. Let's just think about it like this. When Baker Mayfield hurt his hand last weekend, did you know that the backup quarterback for the Browns was Garrett Gilbert? Now, I did because I'm a fanatic, and I remember winning a lot of money off Garrett Gilbert when he lost Alabama in the national title game. But did you know? Because no matter how bad Baker Mayfield was going to be, he was going to take every healthy snap he possibly could because he was number 1 overall pick. He was the franchise. Part of the reason why Nick Foles requested a trade from St. Louis / Los Angeles, because he knew Jared Goff was about to be the guy. Well, Nick Foles went to go be backup quarterback for Carson Wentz, who the Eagles traded up for and went and got and was, hey, this is our guy. He was not expecting to play and didn't play, and no one was thinking about him until week 14. Now, week 14, Carson Wentz tears up his knee. Oh, snap. What do we do now? We have a team. Wentz is playing at an MVP level. How do we rebound? So enter Nick Foles. He has this crazy comeback against the Giants. They were down 20-7, end up winning that game. I think it was 34-29 to secure a first-round bye. Then week 16 comes. He's missing guys. He throws interceptions against the Raiders. Now, they ended up winning the game 19-10. and that sealed home field advantage. It's week 17, who Eagles had nothing to play for, obviously, so who cares? So after week 16 and 17, where they said, okay, what are we going to do? How can we do this? They realized, Doug Peterson and Frank Reich realized that what Nick Foles was really good at Chip Kelly's offense was the RPO. Now, RPO has been around for a long ass time, but nobody really quantified it as called RPO. But the reality of the situation is, it's just, I see the wide receiver 4 steps off. I mean, I see the cornerback 5-6 steps behind the wide receiver. I'm going to throw him the ball instead of handing it off that we were supposed to call. So they just called a bunch of RPO because it was working, and, teams hadn't seen it in such frequency. And they only had 2 or 3 teams to prepare for it. I contend that had the Minnesota Miracle never occurred and New Orleans went on to Philadelphia instead of Minnesota and Case Keenum going on to Philadelphia, that New Orleans would have represented the NFC in that Super Bowl. So let's go to the Super Bowl in which Nick Foles won the MVP. Yes, that's right. Nick Foles was a Super Bowl MVP, and I'm over here bashing him and calling him a career backup. What we are failing to realize is that Matt Patricia had been hired by the Detroit Lions to have been the coach of their team for 2 weeks prior. That defense gave up an insane amount of points, Super Bowl record amount of yards, and the starting cornerback was in tears before kickoff. Just simply because no one's ever talked about it since, we don't know why. Obviously, things were not right in New England before the kickoff of that Super Bowl. Malcolm Butler's crying, and it's not one of those like, oh, I can't believe I'm in this moment tries. He's crying like, I cannot believe this is happening to me. I am helpless in this moment. And no one said anything about why it was the case. But you're not telling me that missing the starting cornerback for the defense, for that, especially the defensive secondary in New England, once they communicate and do they man you up. So especially that's big. That long touchdown against Alshon Jeffrey went up and caught it and landed on his back. That was on Eric Rowe. That wasn't on Malcolm Butler, because Malcolm Butler played less than 2% of all the snaps in that Super Bowl. Nick Foles was in the right place at the right time twice. And because of that, the Jacksonville Jaguars demolished any opportunity that they had to be competitive off of that AFC Championship loss in New England just a few years ago. They needed a quarterback and paid a career backup like he's a difference maker. And the reality of the situation is he's right back where he has been for the vast majority of his career, backing somebody up.
Oh, hell no. Oh, hell no.
Oh, hell no.
All right, so this week on Oh Hell Naw, first up, we've got the San Francisco 49ers. They suspended radio analyst Tim Ryan for 1 game after he made racist comments about Baltimore quarterback Lamar Jackson. Here's what he said. He's really good at that fake, Lamar Jackson. But when you consider his dark skin color with a dark football, with a dark uniform, you could not see that thing. I mean, you literally could not see when he was in and out of the mesh point. And if you're half step slow on him in terms of your vision, forget about it. He's out of the gate. I can barely make it through with a straight face. What do you got to say?
I mean, see, I really hate it because to me this does. Do you think this is racist?
I mean,
I do think
you consider his dark skin color with the dark football with a dark uniform. It's bigoted at worst.
Okay, because when I read it at first, I thought, and it's really hard to say without hearing it in context, right? I think hearing it is important. Reading the quotes, we're ascribing our own opinions to what this actually sounded like, right? But it was raining real hard in Baltimore. And I could see I'll put it like this. There was a point to be made about the inability to see. So without trying to sound like I'm defending the guy, because I don't know anything about him. I've never heard him. I didn't hear these quotes before Marcel read me the story. I can see the point of it being hard to see, especially running the read option in the rain because of the way the quarterback is holding the ball. sticking it into the running back's gut, pulling it back. But I would say this, though. Footballs are brown.
All right. Our next story comes from Florida, where police in Georgia say a man called out of his Steak and Shake job because he was intoxicated, then showed up anyway and demanded money while holding a coworker at gunpoint.
Read it one more time. I'm sorry.
Police in Georgia say a man called out of his Steak and Shake job because he was intoxicated, then showed up anyway and demanded money while holding a coworker at gunpoint. Called out drunk, showed up, remember that rent was due.
Right, because it was because it was the third.
Yep.
That man wanted instant payday.
That man called in drunk and said, "Oh, snap, rent's due." Oh, this happened on Thanksgiving.
So it was Thanksgiving.
Oakwood police investigator Todd Templeton says Gowan called out on Thanksgiving, went to the restaurant that night, held a gun to a coworker's head, and demanded the money. And he was still drunk.
This was in Georgia?
Yes. He briefly raised his gun at officers before dropping it, and he was arrested after a brief struggle, which a stun gun was used.
You know what this reminds me of? Hey, this is season 3, episode 1 of Atlanta.
I think so.
when they go into, I don't know, was that season 3, season 2? Or whatever, they go through the drive-thru and everybody in the restaurant is strapped. My man was ready. He wanted an instant payday. It was robbing season. I get it, man. It's the holidays coming up. But I would say, man, if you already work there, they're going to pay you on Friday. It's just Thursday. It's Thanksgiving. Friday is tomorrow. At the worst, you are 8 days away from payday. I get it. Rent is due. Man, especially if you're going to rob somebody, you shouldn't rob your coworkers. You should rob somebody else's coworkers. Like, preferably someplace you don't work. Because here's the thing. All your coworkers know you. Whether they like you or not, they all know your ass. It's like my dad always told me, man, if you're going to commit crime, do it big and do it once. And it's around nobody who knows who you are.
Thanks for listening to Say Something Nice with Martin Weiss. You can listen or subscribe on SoundCloud or Apple Podcasts app. Make sure you leave a review. Thanks again for listening to Say Something Nice with Martin Weiss.